with that, let me go ahead and get into introducing Daisha here. Daisha Board is with Daisha Board Gallery. And as well, she wears many hats, as literally,
Figuratively.
as someone who advocates for artists and specifically for BIPOC, LGBTQ, and artists with disabilities in the city. And we're here to talk to her today about her gallery, her background, and what she's doing differently that has kind of caught our attention. With that, Daisha, can you kind of introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background to start?
Sure. Well, thank you first for having me. It's a great honor. I've been following you all for a long time, and I love what you're doing. You probably don't even know you've been an inspiration to me. So
Ah,
just being in this space and finding authentically aligned organizations that I can work with, that I can piggyback off of, or just, get some advice here and there has been so instrumental to what I'm doing in my career right now. But I'm originally from New York, born and raised, but I came out here in high school. My mother works for American Airlines and moved out here in ninth grade, went to high school in Lamar in Arlington, then went to college in Florida, came back, I started a family, had intentions of going to law school. That did not happen. But I got into real estate and the mortgage industry, was in that industry for over 20 years.
oh,
Got tired of it. I didn't want to be at the disposal of these companies any longer and really wanted to focus on something I was more passion focused on and centered around. Something I could leave to my kids, a legacy, and I love art. My family collects art, and I thought, well, how can I turn this into a business for myself and still be rooted in the community? So here now, it's been a work in progress. I'm loving the space that we're in, but this is not my background at all. This is all new to me. I'm still learning. I'm still a student to this, but I'm here, and I know that there's an amazing community of artists who need this space and visibility to show their work. So just very proud of what we're doing here.
awesome. Yeah.
I have three kids, married, three wonderful children, 21, 15, and 13, two boys and a girl. We live out in Allen, so I commute back and forth to Dallas, but I love it. I love it here. I go back to New York ever so often, but this is home.
Awesome. And your gallery is really new too. I think that that's like important to point out. And part of why I think it's interesting to bring you in to speak to people is you're in that very fresh area of having just started things. And I think that's kind of an inspirational way to get some advice. Of course, from people who have had galleries for years as well, but your perspective is going to be different in that way. And
7 months in, we made our 7-month anniversary. So, woo.
yes, yes. And how many shows have you had so far?
So we're on our fifth show.
Your fifth show. Awesome.
Yeah.
Before starting the gallery, you had Black Sheep Art Culture.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you formed that? Or like I've read about it, and it's kind of a nebulous thing of what it did and how kind of working through that led you to your path to actually opening your own space.
Right, no doubt. Yeah, well, Black Sheep Art Culture was something that we created right after I got laid off. I really wanted to figure out my placement in this space. And I love hip hop, so it's an ode to Black Sheep, the rap group, and the song Choice Is Yours. So really rooted in hip hop, really rooted in community, really rooted in culture. And how can I bridge that gap between going to these galleries and figuring out where is the representation of women artists? Where is the representation of artists of color? And how can I help, bridge that gap? And so Black Sheep Art Culture was created in those efforts to bring people of color to these spaces that are predominantly white, wealthy, from a particular social economic background, and how can we make it more inclusive? So I started throwing different events at galleries and institutions of tours and just artist talks, and just bringing people who've never even set foot in a gallery setting and making it feel, very welcoming and comfortable for them. And then it kind of transitioned into me helping those gallerists and those spaces with not only developing a new demographic for them that they weren't reaching, but bringing the artists in, that were reflective of the community, bringing collectors in that were willing to buy these works, and really helping them articulate their stories. Because a lot of times, in order for them to show these artists, they would have to talk, about the art, right? Or be able to express that to their buyers or the people that walk in the door, and they couldn't do that. So Black Sheep art culture kind of stayed within that realm of working in galleries, working in non-traditional spaces, bringing in new collectors for the past 4 years. And, it was great. I really enjoyed it. But then it kind of began to feel performative, right? Like it was only Black History Month or Pride Month or, Women's History Month that they would call me. And I said, you know what, I have to change this. Our stories exist every day. So how can I truly, create this narrative and show this body of work by these artists all the time? And so having my own space was really what I needed to do next, transitioning into ownership.
And when did you start Black Sheep?
2017.
2017. So I think it's interesting that you talk about performative gestures.
Right.
And one thing I was curious to talk to you about was, after in 2020, after George Floyd's murder and all the racial equity protests, I think, I know, because businesses, organizations, galleries, everybody was making these, public affirmations that they're going to do better to represent Black people specifically. And I know some of the Black artists I know almost felt overwhelmed with the amount of people who are all of a sudden reaching out to them. And I think all of that's great. But I'm curious from your perspective, who, really was working at this since 2017, how you feel like that moment has created a shift in the Dallas art world specifically. If you think that it's been a really good lasting movement, or is that also maybe why you broke away and just wanted to start doing your own thing?
Right. I needed to have my own space, because although we want allyship, we want people who are there in support of the movement, who recognize their privilege and also want to be able to be impactful within these communities. It's not a one and done, it's a continuous process. It's a continuous conversation about the things that happen within this community, discrimination, all the inequalities, the disparity between women artists and male artists. There's just so many issues that we have here that hasn't really fully been addressed. But what they were trying to do is put a Band-Aid over an open wound, and you can't do that. You have to work on healing that wound, right? And so a lot of people didn't really want to take ownership of what their biases were and talk more about that. It was always just, well, I can have a Black artist here and I'm gonna show solidarity through that way. But no, that's not really putting in the work. So you had a lot of people that were being exposed for that. Okay, well, you put up the Black box and you said you support us, but then where is it coming into fruition? Where are these artists now? How much work have you truly put into this effort? And it's less than 5%. So that just goes to show you that it was all talk. It's performative. So we have to just hold these institutions accountable, especially when they're city-funded institutions and they're supposed to be rooted in community, and they have these big diversity and inclusion grants that they receive, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not talking about small amounts of money. They receive, 200,000, 300,000 here and there for specific programming for diversity and inclusion. Where is that money going? So we just have to, hold them accountable, and having a space now that focuses on these communities of artists and communities that are coming in where it's a safe space, it's a comfortable space, I think is what's needed more here in Dallas.
On kind of continuing on this thread, there's one description of Black Sheep, and we'll get more into the gallery too, but I love this sentence: to educate and create a legacy of art in the Black community with new collectors. And I think that a lot of representation, you think about artists themselves, but I thought that was interesting that you include diversity in collectors and patronage as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you have gone, like your methods of going out of your way to not only be diverse with the artists you represent, but the people who collect that art?
Right. It's something that was instilled in me at a young age. My grandparents worked hard, and they were in a community in New York and Harlem and Queens, where a lot of culture was around them. So my grandmother, she collected art, she collected jewelry, she traveled a lot, and she passed that all down to us. And so as an adult, I learned more about what that means. What does it mean to build this legacy? What does it mean to accumulate generational wealth? We spend a lot of money. The Black and brown communities of this country, we put a lot of money into other people's pockets. How is that money regenerated within our families and our communities? So yeah, it's extremely important for me to invite people of color, third generation, to come in and say, well, I'm buying my first home. How can I add more value to my home by including art into that, right? So we have these open conversations and dialogues about, yes, art is an asset. Let me show you how. Continue that conversation. And now my collectors have gone from traditionally older white men, wealthy men who collect Black art or contemporary art from the diaspora, but it's gone from that to more Black and brown families or millennials who are thinking more about building this legacy, right? And not continually putting money in other people's pockets, but having something they can leave for their families, this generational wealth.
Yeah, I think, something we think about a lot in the Cedars Union is who's collecting and
right.
who gets passed up and not thought of as a collector because we're so focused on, like these certain tiers of patronage. When a lot of people want to collect and support local artists, and how can we make that easier for them? And so much of it is creating a place where they can find that. And I know so many of the artists that you've shown are local to DFW. Can you share also a little bit about the work you do to find artists and maybe how artists can make themselves easier to be found? Like what tips you have for artists that are looking for gallery representation or attention in that way?
Right. Social media, as much as I love to hate it sometimes, it's a huge platform for artists. And if you're not savvy on technology, or, you haven't really experienced, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, you have a love-hate relationship with it too, just get on there and at least put some of your work out there, show some of your works in process, show up to these, group shows, talk to people, whether there's another artist who may be more vocal on what they're doing, kind of pick their brain and see how you can get into certain spaces, open calls. I think the best way to show up is to show up. You have to diversify these spaces where you're changing this narrative of what is comfortable art out here in Dallas and giving them something that they can really hold, with some true value to me, like some true substance. So if you're creating a body of work, you don't want it to just sit in your living room. You want it to be seen, I would hope, and a lot of these artists are very passionate, and they're centered around, that emotion of what they're creating, and they don't want to be judged or they don't want to be rejected, but that's the part of life, right? So we just have to be more intuitive and in tune with each other, lifting each other up, supporting each other, which I've seen so much of here in Dallas. And that's a big part of how I find my artists is through another artist. Well,
Yeah.
hey, have you met this artist? Let me introduce you to them, because I think they will fit great in what you're doing, So it's been a lot of that, in addition to social media. But I would say show up to these spaces and, make the uncomfortable, know who you are. You have nothing to hide. Be who you are authentically, and the right people will start lining up, around you.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because that was similar advice that we did a Q&A, gosh, I guess that 2 years ago with Erin Cluley, who also shows a lot of local artists through Erin Cluley Gallery. And she kind of said the same thing, that a lot of the new artists she finds is through other artists that she represents. And so just sort of like building up that network is so important, and you just kind of got to get out there and do it, and think of it as like work that maybe is more fun than
yeah. Relax, be yourself. You don't have to pull out your CV or your portfolio right there on the spot, but get the card or get the information that you need to kind of follow up, and be persistent. So nothing in life comes easy. Like, you have to work for it. It's not just going to happen just because you have 10,000 followers on Instagram. I know artists who have 200 followers who are doing exceedingly well just because, they made the right connections and talking to the right people to get them where they want to go. So, and then, kind of getting out of this imposter syndrome, don't compare yourself to other artists. You are your own individual, and there's someone who will resonate with your art and your message. So just don't give up.
Yeah. All right. Well, good advice. Let me go. And also, we do have a public Q&A. Oh, yes. I know people were asking for to turn on captions for accessibility. And I think especially in this virtual Q&A, but
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say that we do not have that ability. And it is something we've talked about in the past, and I will continue to look into it, and also maybe write to Zoom about it. Sorry about that.
Right. And my apologies too.
Yeah. On it. Thank you for bringing it up. Not everyone thinks about it, so I appreciate you bringing that up. So can you talk a little bit, especially since you have kind of like this finance and business background, that I know a lot of creative people kind of just run away from, and for every which reason, but the actual kind of brass tacks of starting your gallery, like where were you told us kind of why you wanted to start one, but what led you to think like, okay, I'm in a good place in my networking to go ahead and take this financial dive, or like what were the things you did what were the things you did to get the business up and running?
Yeah. I was in a place, I was in a place of, do you leave a stable job where you have a stable paycheck, you have a 401k, you have benefits, all the things that we want to be able to retire with, right? And then you just automatically just kind of shut that off and say, you know what, I want to go with this entrepreneur route. That's scary as hell. Excuse my language. I didn't understand how I was going to put food on the table. I didn't understand how I was gonna, pay my bills. And, I'm just stepping out on faith. But luckily and thankfully, my support system has been extremely strong. We saved, and we kind of mapped out this plan, this 5-year plan that we put ourselves on, that I put myself on, of making this happen and making it a reality, and not being a business that will not succeed after a year and fall apart, and all of the things that I'm still constantly learning to make my business better. Although I have this background, it's still different. It's still kind of just learning a lot of habits that I had and executing on them and saying, okay, I can't do it this way. I have to do it this way based off of what I'm dealing with now, being in business for myself. So yeah, it's been a process. It definitely hasn't been easy, right?
Yeah.
I'm more focused on now learning more about the financial side of my business and being more hands-on with it, and not just putting it up to my accountants or my husband or people I trust with that knowledge. I have to be just as equally knowledgeable on that end as well. And I tell my artists the same thing. You have to be able to create your resume, update it. You have to be able to create your website, update it. You're gonna have to be able to follow up and email people. You're gonna have to constantly communicate, sometimes. And some people just don't have that business savvy. So, and I'm not an expert. I'm still learning and growing within this space. And so all of those years in real estate, you're trained for real estate finance. This is a whole nother market. This is a whole nother beast. So I have to, relearn some things or just constantly educate myself on making it better to fit me.
Is there something after, having worked with artists for years that, this is actually a really hard question, but does something stand out that you feel like artists really should know, like something that you're finding like a missing piece that you have to constantly remind artists of?
Actually, no.
Yeah.
I think it's a kind of like a dual session between both. Like, I'm learning from them just as much as they're learning from me. I think if anything, it's just that business acumen of tightening up some things that are requested of galleries, right? And tightening up your art. I mean, you would think those things would be obvious, but sometimes, it may just slip their mind. And so you have to say, okay, in order for me to sell this body of work, we have to make sure that, certain things are fine tuned. But it's still I'm not an expert, and this is great that I'm here on your platform, but I'm still learning. And I learn every day from my artists. I learn every day from the person that walks in this door about how they resonate with art and what they feel connected to. So I would never say that I have all the answers. I don't. And that's what keeps me grounded and keeps me humble.
Do you make art yourself at all? Or what about someone asked about if you ever like DJ or curate music for the gallery, which actually leads into another question I have. But
so I'm a creative. I do have a passion for art. I like to create portraits, but I'm definitely not as confident. I'm confident in other ways, but I wouldn't put my art in here. It has my name on the gallery, but that's about it. Like, I'm not that confident to call myself a full-time artist. My connection is with people, right? Mm-hmm. So I've always had that gift. And in order for me to have a space where I appreciate art, I understand how important it is for people to resonate with it. I have a space where, I'm connecting with people every day, and that's my joy. So you won't see the Daisha Board collection anytime soon. I curate my playlist based off a title of how I'm feeling today, whether it's the soft, slow jazz or some hip hop, but you can hear about anything in here.
Yeah.
Well, keep it on rotation.
And I haven't had the pleasure to attend one of your openings. That our calendars don't seem to match up very well, and I also have a 7-month-old baby at home, so my nightlife is pretty limited. Yeah. But I recently ran into someone who had just come from one of your shows, and they were like, man, like, it's a party there. There's a DJ, there's a liquor sponsor, and I've been going to gallery openings, for years and years, and it just sounds like and I've watched some videos of people like dancing, just a totally different vibe going on in your openings. Can you talk about like your I guess your urge to sort of make these parties, or what you're doing with those events?
Right. So those are one of the things that I noticed was missing when I would go to some of the openings, out here. I would go, and it's, your typical, crowd, and, you have the wine sometimes, and, people are talking about the art, or, They're talking about other things and not the art. So I always felt kind of out of place in those settings because I like music. I think that music brings out a lot more energy from people, and a good cocktail never hurts either. But I wanted it to be an ambiance where people felt relaxed and not, just being in a white space or feeling uncomfortable being here or feeling awkward. And so when you have the music, you kind of just bounce your head and you're walking around and you're looking at art and you're talking to people. And, if you feel engaged to dance, then do that, right? It's still a contemporary art gallery. We're still focused on that. But I would never not have an event where those things would, line up. Because I really feel like it brings out the best in people, to have it, where they feel good about being in that space, and they talk about it the next day, and the next person they talk to says, well, you know what, I'm gonna show up. And that's what's been happening. People are talking about coming to the openings and the closings and the artist talks where they feel connected. They feel like it's family, and that's how I want them to feel.
It's interesting. I on my own have been thinking a lot about the notion of hospitality and the way that it does or doesn't tie into an art viewing experience. And I think that there's a lot of traditional austerity that comes with the sort of like white cube gallery. But when you talk about trying to open art to a different base of collectors, I mean, all that makes sense, right? You need to make people feel welcome, and not intimidated and comfortable. Right. Otherwise, the art feels like it's like, it could feel like it's like pushing you away, not bringing you in.
Right. It feels stale. It feels like, there's no true connection there. And I don't have that all the time. It's just typically for the openings and closings. But during the week, we do have music playing softly, and people can spend more intimate time with the work. But I still want them to know when you walk through this door, I want you to leave all of that extra stress that you've been feeling that's been built up and come in here and kind of engage with art, talk about it, ask questions, where you do know that this is a comfortable space for you to do that. And so that awkwardness or that, that inferiority feeling is gone. Like, no, everyone should be able to see art for one, and then you should also have the ability to acquire it as well. So, and that's how we started. We started off as making it welcoming for everyone.
That's awesome. Have you, this is a question from a listener. Did you receive any city or private sector funding from grants or business loans to start the business?
No.
Okay.
Nothing. And I know they're out there, being a Black woman in this space, being a minority in this space, there's a lot of funding that the city would offer, but I didn't go for it. And I wouldn't advise that for, people who don't have the funding themselves to be able to start their initial business. If there are opportunities out there, look them up, do your research. And I didn't do that, which is fine. I felt like I needed to have something I could control, and I didn't want anyone to tell me how to run my business by having, multiple investors or funding from other sources. It's me and my family. That's it, and I'm okay with that. But there are opportunities that have been presented to me by being a Black woman in this space that I can help other artists, and making sure that I'm paying them to show up. If I'm going to have an event outside of the gallery, I want to make sure these artists are compensated. I don't want them just to say, I'll give you the visibility and the exposure. Well, exposure doesn't pay the bill sometimes. So if there's opportunities that will provide funding for my artists, then yes, I will have that money being allotted to them versus giving it to me. I wanted to, help them and put money in their pockets because it's hard. You don't want to continually be this starving artist. You want to have a level of success too. And so now that more opportunities are being presented to me in that way, that's the direction I want to go, whether it's rooted in community and programming or helping fund other artists and their ability to keep producing the work. That's the goal.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that I am surprised when I speak to people how often people don't understand the amount of time and actual like financial cost it can cost an artist to put up a show.
Oh yeah.
And if your only means is to sell the work itself, I mean, I know that that is a large reality of putting up an art show, but if there's any other support out there that can just like alleviate some of the burden so that if you get an opportunity to have a show, it doesn't ever become something you can't afford to take, you know?
Right.
And so that's something the Cedars Union thinks about a lot. And you know, we're not a gallery. We support artists with studio space, and in education and community. But that's something we really think a lot about in terms of, you know, what we might want to do in the future. And I will say, since we're talking about it, there is coming up the Office of Art and Culture for Dallas. Their Arts Activate grant, the first round of it is coming up. I think the first round is due July 5th. And I don't know if they've put it up on their website yet, but it's coming. So we'll definitely be posting more about that for artists to take advantage of some city funding apply.
And it's out there.
That goes back to you, Daisha.
Yeah, it's out there, and you can't constantly complain about what you're not receiving if you're not actively going out there looking for it or applying for it. And I'm not saying that you're not, but you have to be actively doing that, right? And I've seen a lot of times that funding is going to the same artists or the same organizations over and over and over again. So I don't think it's a lack of applicants. I think, or I do think it's a lack of applicants. I think it's, you know, they really need to be motivated to put it out there and say, yes, don't be ashamed of that. Yeah, if you want $5,000 that'll provide supplies for you to help build your business, ask for that. You know, asking, you know, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Like, you have to be able to put it out there, you know, and let them know this is what I need. And then the city, you know, we have so many murals around the city where, you know, they're showing these advertisements in other cities outside of Dallas. Why do you think we have this influx of people moving to Dallas? You know, from LA and Chicago and all these major cities, they're showing these communities where art is present, you know, where it's diversity, where they're gentrifying. So they need you just as much as you need them. So, you know, ask.
Yes, yeah, that's a good call for action, everybody. Look into it. And we actually just, sorry, I'm have like the sun setting behind me. I'm at my parents' house because my mother watches my daughter. She's such a saint.
I know that.
She loves it, but anyway. There's a conversation, a webinar that we did in 2020 with Dale Ratcliffe that's all about artist grants, and that's on our resource page, which is also where this talk will live on afterward. So if you ever miss one of our webinars, we do put them up on our resources page afterward, which is just under the program section. And, you know, also on that note, I put a question in at the beginning of the poll. We are thinking about bringing back live, or this is live, but in-person conversations. But we also want to maintain the accessibility we've reached through doing things online. So if you have any opinions about, you know, how virtual has impacted you in terms of Cedars Union programming, or if you're like, man, I am really ready to get back into the space with people and have embodied connection, I dropped my email in there. I'm kind of just like casually taking people's thoughts on that. So please add that in. I have a question. Is Cedars Union historically known to be a racist organization? No, absolutely not. We do have a lot of room to grow, and I don't think that we would ever feel satisfied saying that we don't, because as Daisha talked about before, racial equity and equity of all kinds is something that you continually work on. It's not one and done. We do have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and access committee that regularly looks at these things. And we're proud to have had, God, what was the number? I think 46% or almost half of our cohorts in the past be artists of color. We also have an art and equity scholarship. Anyway, so we work hard, and there's a lot of good work that still needs to be done. Also, always open to people sharing their thoughts and opinions like that, because we're a firm believer that open dialogue is a catalyst to change. So anyway, that's my answer to that question. Does anybody else have any questions? Or Daisha, would you like to kind of add anything, or do you have any questions for the audience?
Ooh, I don't have any questions.
It's okay. It's kind of, and also like you can't see the audience. It's kind of a weird.
Where are y'all? Ask questions. I mean, go ahead.
We do have one for you that I think is a great question. Where do you hope to grow in the next few years?
Oh gosh. So we're 7 months in. I have been extremely blessed and excited about the response we've been receiving. I knew it was present. I knew people, just giving them a different experience, people would resonate towards it, because I could feel it. I could almost taste that hunger of people saying, well, we love art. We want to be in these spaces, but there isn't a true reflection of me within these spaces. And so that was disappointing. And to now have a space of my own that crosses so many different communities, and so many people are walking through this door and feeling a connection to the space is so rewarding. But I also recognize that Dallas is a great foundation for me, but it's not the ultimate goal. So I have to continually put these artists in spaces where they're going to elevate their careers. Like, I don't want them just to be known for, being a Dallas artist. Like, if you want to continually go into this fine art category, I have to put us in spaces that will help facilitate that. So it's going to these contemporary art fairs like Art Basel this year, or going to New York for Freeze, or overseas, and just kind of connecting with these spaces and making sure that I'm, continuing this conversation of elevating these artists, because, I want my collectors to feel confident in knowing that I'm not just selling you a piece of art just because it looks pretty. I want you to be connected to it, for one. I want you to learn about the artist, for two. And then I want you to keep supporting that artist, because it is an investment, right? So 2 years from now, Daisha Board Gallery may be in New York or LA or overseas, but we're definitely going to have a presence, and I'm going to make sure of that.
Awesome. Okay, we got a bunch of questions come in as you were answering that. A couple of them relate to what artists can do to grow or spread the word about, specifically about their shows that may be held in alternative spaces. Aside from website and social media, do you have any suggestions?
Right. I think, excuse me, let me get this off. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, right? So when people ask you to be a part of their group shows or exhibitions, or, they want to represent you on some of these galleries, smaller galleries, you need to hold them accountable too, because they should be putting in that work. They should be properly marketing you. They should have a press release that's being sent out to, the press to come out to review your work or to see it ahead of time. Marketing materials like flyers or postcards. All of those things, they do cost money, but, if you're giving them a percentage of your work, they should be held accountable for making sure and ensuring that they're inviting people into the space. And I think a lot of that fell short with a lot of these galleries. And when they realized during the pandemic, well, how do I reach these people now? And they had to kind of scramble and get on social media and, have an online presence and have visual, virtual galleries, and didn't know how to kind of facilitate that because they were so used to just kind of doing the bare minimum. But now they have to work, right?
Yeah.
So, hold them accountable and say, if you want my work, because you're the draw, you're the artist, we need you, right? So they should be doing more to help share your work. So yeah, when you go in those spaces, let them know, look, I don't want my art just to sit on this wall. I need it to be seen. And how can you make that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great, I think just, also there's a lot to be said for kind of, as you're saying, like show up, but organic and word of mouth marketing. If you've got a show opening up in a week, and I feel like people's time, like memories are around that like 2 week span. Like the Saturday before your show, go out and everyone you see, be like, hey, I'm having a show next week.
Yeah.
Because some people miss it on their phones, and but if you see them face to face and remind them, like, hey, be here, it's gonna be great.
Right. Tag people, tag all the news publications, tag, other artists who you see, promote other artists' work, because they'll share it. All that's free, marketing, and I think we've been blessed in that because so many people who come in here, they're sharing it on social media. They're creating reels and TikToks, and I'm not even on TikTok. And we went viral on TikTok. I have people coming in saying they saw me in Oklahoma on, TikTok. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy that this is a destination for you now. But, and I try to thank everyone that does that, because you don't have to do that, right? I didn't hire a big PR firm to do all my public relations. I'm doing that. But I appreciate just the genuine thought of saying, I enjoyed my time at this space, and I'm going to create this reel for people to see and come visit me, because it happens, it works. People are showing up every day. So yeah, you have to kind of be mindful of what you're doing to create more, business for yourself, but in the spaces where your art is also a part of, holding them accountable as well.
Okay, this question is, I think I might be misunderstanding it. Are you looking to represent artists, or can you share any thoughts about representation? I guess maybe they're asking about like how you represent artists. Is it kind of one show and then, or do you kind of collect like a group that you represent on an ongoing? I mean, it's new, right? So
right. But no, it's a full representation gallery here. So the artists that I featured so far, 5 of them are represented completely by Daisha Board Gallery. And so I help them after the show. I still represent their work. I still have inventory on their work, and we still try to build within other spaces to show their work. So it's a partnership. This isn't a one and done. I've had a situation where the artist wasn't completely ready to kind of commit to representation. And my representation isn't for 2-3 years like a lot of other galleries. It's only 1 year. And that's short for the amount of work that I do. So, but I don't want people to feel restricted or handcuffed to, one gallery, because I understand there's opportunities, in other spaces where it may be more, a more convenient opportunity for them. But I want my relationship with my artists to be long-term. I don't want it to just be for the month that I show them. So there's no option in that. I have to be able to have at least a year with you to help your business grow and really show to my collectors that I'm invested into you as an artist.
That's cool. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's more of a traditional mentorship setup. And I know, I mean, a lot of galleries do that, but I think, even someone who mentioned in the chat, some people don't know that that's the setup going on behind the scenes. So I'm glad you asked that, anonymous audience member. Okay. And we are kind of coming close to the end here. I'm going to get through a couple more questions. I had a question about, will you stream any events on Facebook? I guess because there is, I don't, you don't have performance in the events, do you?
Performances?
Yeah.
Well, we will incorporate that. Actually, next month we'll have a performance piece in addition to our exhibition. The beauty of this space is we're not just showing one style of art, right? So we're going to keep exposing people to all mediums, all genres. You know, there'll be performance art, there'll be installations, there'll be a digital NFT component, sculptures. This isn't just a one and done space. Every month, people are looking forward to what's next. And so I don't put it out there until like the week before we open a new show, because I want to give that previous artist their space to live and breathe in their moment. And that's so important, right? Because we're in this competitive, you know, industry, and everyone is kind of just popping up and doing these shows, but I want them to have their time. And so it's important for me to do that. And then the next show is just even more exciting to see and to anticipate. So.
Interesting marketing strategy. It also just means that like you need to really follow the gallery closely to know what's happening. Playing a little hard to get. Okay. Great. And will you have a group show anytime soon? I know you have had one in the past, right?
Yeah, so right now curating in other non-traditional spaces like 500X, or I'll be out in Fort Worth in a few months for a group show and juried a show at one of the high schools out here, which was amazing, Booker T. Washington. And just to see that level of talent was just phenomenal from these high school students. And so in the future, for next year, definitely I want to incorporate a group show featuring college students, and then also a separate one featuring high school students, because what I've seen is, you know, that confidence level shoots up when people come out and they support these artists, young artists, right? And they see their work, and you know, they want to keep creating. You know, they don't want to maybe go in a traditional role of being a doctor, a lawyer, engineer. They want to be an artist. And so to have people show up in those spaces and they see their work on these beautiful white walls, and they're like, wow, this can really turn into a lucrative career for me. And you know, the confidence is just built that way. You know, our last artist, Aaliyah, student at UNT, 21 years old, you know, and it's so extremely rare to have a solo show in a gallery at that age. Yeah. Not even receiving her MFA yet, but undergrad, right? And
didn't it sell out or something?
Yeah, like in 2 days, you know, the first 2 days, you know, we have a few of her works left, but that confidence, right? And you already have an established collector base now. You have people who have collected your work, you know, and her style will change. You know, she's going to Florence for her study abroad program through UNT, and she'll learn so much more. But that's the beauty of it. You know, you already have this built-in confidence now that says, you know what, I have people who are lifting me up, who are going to support my work and show up in my space when I do present more. So yeah, I would love to do the group shows going into next year.
Awesome. Do you have any opinion on, and this is the last question, y'all. Do you have any opinion on what makes fine art photography high quality? This is specifically asking from a photographer. And they talk about the frame or the material it's printed on. Maybe I should add also just like if it's a good work, right?
Yeah, and that's so interesting that question is brought up, because our next show, I'll give you a little sneak peek. It is documentary photography, and that is a new market for me. Like, I've been selling a lot of contemporary art, but photography has never been one of them. So to have an exhibition centered around photography will be new. And so we kind of just went through different businesses that focus on, you know, setting up the frame, and whether or not we wanted to print the work on stainless steel versus a traditional way of doing it, you know, what the viewer is kind of focusing on. And but to me, I want the photographer to be, well, the artist to be in control of that. Like, I don't want to say and assume that people are going to buy it based off of what I think modern contemporary art is leaning towards. You know, if you are more traditional in your approach, yeah, you may have to research the paper that you use, like archival print paper, you know, very high quality, the museum quality glass, framing, very befitting of the photography in itself. So it's you have to just do your research, right? So I don't have one particular way of doing it, but I do trust that these professionals in these areas will give me the advice that I need. But ultimately, I just want it to be seen, and then seeing where people can, resonate with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just feel like it depends so much on the photo,
Right.
or the artwork on how it should be presented.
Right.
Okay, well, great. Sponsors and listen life. So there's a couple more lingering questions. I think that don't forget, as we're talking about like putting yourself out there and being an advocate for yourself. I'll speak for Daisha a little bit and say that you can always contact people and ask them questions and kind of be bold in that way. I saw somebody talking about maybe interested in volunteering for your gallery. That's a museum educator. And pay attention. If there's a gallery that you feel like you would be a good fit in, go to the openings, follow them, get on the mailing list, and be a friend of that gallery. And then that's a good way to catch a gallerist's attention, is just to be there. And it's a lot of the way that those relationships are built, the way that relationships are built in general. So to an extent, it's not
that's right. And it's easier said than done for a lot of artists too, from what I've heard going into the space of Black sheep art culture. They get a lot of rejection, that they are told their work isn't good enough, or they don't have a specific, buyer that will buy that work, that they can't properly sell that work. And so, that's a lot of frustration when you want to be in a traditional gallery setting and you're constantly being told your work isn't good enough, or there isn't anyone who would appreciate it, right? So what do you do? Who do you reach out to at that point? So just kind of not letting that stop you. Like, I knew I was the Black sheep coming into this industry. I don't have a huge trust fund. My background is not in art history, right? But I knew that there was a demand and there were people here that would support me, and I was persistent. So don't give up, don't stop at that one no. Keep pursuing, your goal of showing in the gallery. And the right person, you'll link up with that right person at the right time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think this was fantastic. I really hope everybody listening today got a lot out of this.
I hope so too.
No, it was really wonderful. I really appreciate your time. And like I said before, we will be posting this recording onto our website in a few weeks. If you need to revisit anything, or if you missed part of the conversation, you can tune in there. And we do have a public event at the Cedars Union coming up. Our summer open studios are on June 4th. It's a Saturday. And so from 1 to 5 p.m. on June 4th, if you want to come in and meet some of our artists and get to see artists' studios, so art in progress, it's a great experience, and I really hope you can make it out. And with that,
we have our artist talk on Saturday with Romulo Martinez, Venezuelan artist, super amazing mixed media artist, from 3 to 5, with Jessica Fuentes, the news editor at Glass Tire. So that's here Saturday. But yeah, show up. We want people to engage with art, ask questions, meet other artists, meet other creatives, and not be intimidated. Like, we're here, we're present. And so in order for us to kind of change the narrative of how everyone is viewed, from a woman's perspective, from a person of color's perspective, from a queer person's perspective, we have to challenge, what they're typically being shown, right? And show them some true, authentic parts of us. So I'm loving it. I'm loving what I'm seeing. I'm loving what we're doing here. I'm loving what you're doing. Just keep showing up.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
You too. Thank you. Peace.